What's up, everybody? It's Goddess Z, and I'm here with another episode on Holistic and Spiritual AF. Welcome back, fam. I appreciate each and every one of you tuning in. This podcast is growing, it's getting greater and better, and that's a lot to do because of you, okay? And if this is your first time landing on this podcast, you have definitely landed in the right place if you're into topics such as how to connect with your ancestors, how to access your divine feminine codes, metaphysics, esoterics. We talk about all sorts of things pertaining to those topics. And this podcast airs every Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with a new episode. And so on the first and the third Fridays of the month, I have a guest coming in sharing their wisdom, their expertise. And on the second and the fourth Fridays of the month, I come in sharing my downloads, my transmissions, my wisdom as well. And so that is what today's episode is going to actually be about. Today's episode is episode 72, Ancestors, Epigenetics, and You. Okay, so you'll definitely want to make sure you stick around all the way to the end to listen to this entire podcast. Be sure to follow and subscribe depending on where you're listening at. And the podcast is everywhere: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, pretty much anywhere that podcasts are syndicated. Okay, so definitely make sure you're listening and tuning in and also checking out some of those other previous episodes because there's been some really solid episodes. And then 2026 has just definitely been hit the ground running. Okay. Definitely, I'm going to have my contact information and all the ways you can reach me down in the description. You can check out my website, holisticandspiritualaf.com, and I'm all over social media at Holistic and Spiritual AF. That's and spelled out. Okay, so with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into today's episode. I've been trying to do better about making sure that I just go ahead and get into the damn topic and not get into all of this extra talking and stuff. Okay, so I know you guys appreciate that a lot more. So, once again, today is episode 72, Ancestors, Epigenetics, and You. And so, if this is your first time ever hearing me, I'm definitely highly passionate about my ancestors. I've been on the path, a spiritual and healing path, for the last 22 years. And I've been consciously connected to my ancestors since I was a little girl. Okay. Having telepathic communications with them, very connected to them. And my ancestors are an integral part of my life. They've helped me throughout so many different circumstances and situations in my life. And I just definitely have this strong, powerful relationship with my ancestors. And as I'm a firm believer that I am where I am today because of my ancestors, especially coming from the life that I came from. All right. So if you want to know more about that, be sure to check out my podcast episodes previous to this, particularly the earlier episodes. Those are the ones where I kind of go more into my story. But yeah, definitely that's me. I'm always going to be interested in that. And I'm very passionate about helping other people to be able to access their ancestors as well and to have that connection with their ancestors to start their journey because it's been so impactful for me. It's been so impactful for others. And so there's a lot of people that are seeking that. And so that's what I do. I offer a lot of information and classes that help people to kind of become that bridge of where they are now and where they would like to be. Because I'm a firm believer that we all come from different lineages, different paths, we have different purposes and destinies. And it's very important for me to just kind of reconnect them and help them to reclaim and remember who they are and who their soul is having this human experience. And so I don't get too far in the way of what it is that their ancestors have for them to do. All right. So back to today's episodes, episode 72, Ancestors, Epigenetics, and You. And what we're going to be talking about is understanding that our experience and our ancestors are not separate from us. Our ancestors are also inside of us. All right. And so we're going to be breaking that down from a Afro-Indigenous as well as a spiritual and scientific perspective, because I recognize that some people, resonate with things a little differently. We just recently had the science versus spirituality class yesterday. It was awesome. If you missed that, make sure you're following me because more classes will be to come. Okay. But I talk about how the two are very integrated. They're not separate. And you'll see as we go throughout this episode that science is basically something that scientific explanations of things that our ancestors were already doing and they were already known. Okay, so the reality is that we all came here with carrying memory, carrying ancestral memory, carrying memory from past lives. We also came carrying spiritual gifts, and then we also came showing up with some patterns as well. All right, and some of that shows us where there's pain that we can't explain, things that were also inherited in our DNA that were not necessarily so pleasant, particularly if you are of the African diaspora. And over here in America, there's a lot of trauma that's stored in our DNA as well. Okay. And so there's sometimes ways that we behave and patterns that we have that epigenetics helps to describe, but also the fact that this stuff is in our DNA. Okay. Because we are our ancestors as well. All right. So if you know me, I always like to break things down into bite sized, digestible pieces. And so I want to talk about what epigenetics actually is. And I always kind of give the definition. We give the Western side of things, and then we also give the ancestral Afro Indigenous perspective as well. Okay. So epigenetics is the understanding that our experiences, emotional, physical, environmental, and spiritual, influence how our genes are expressed without changing the DNA itself. It explains how what our ancestors lived through, what we live through now, and how we respond to life can activate or quiet certain traits in the body, mind, and spirit across generations. In other words, the blueprint stays the same, but the way it reads changes. All right. Now, the scientific definition of that is from a scientific perspective, epigenetics studies how factors like stress, trauma, nutrition, environment, and behavior can turn genes on or off through chemical markers without altering the DNA sequence. These changes can affect how the nervous system responds, shape emotional regulation, influence physical health, be passed down across generations. So basically, science confirms that the body keeps a record of the experience. Now, from the Afro Indigenous interpretation, epigenetics is what our ancestors have always known. Memory lives in the blood, the bones, and the breath, okay? Our ancestors understood that what is lived is carried, what is unresolved is transmitted, and what is healed can be released. What is powerful can be reawakened. So, epigenetics in this framework is ancestral memory in motion, okay? And it explains, like I said, once again, how trauma can be passed to us, but also how wisdom, intuition, rhythm, resilience, and our spiritual gifts travel through lineage. All right. So, where science says gene expression, our ancestors said inheritance of spirit. Okay. Because we come from spiritual people, and as indigenous people of the earth, and that's all over the earth, all sorts of indigenous people, not just people of the African diaspora, but they were all very heavily connected to spirit, to nature, to their ancestors. Okay. So, this stuff was carried and passed down inside of the blood, and we just understood things. Okay, so what you'll start to find out is a lot of times science is a way to explain things that were already embodied and known. Okay, and because we've been so pulled away from excuse me, because we've been so pulled away from spirit and spiritual practices and pushed more into material, mundane, human types of expression more than spirit, then there needs to be an explanation of stuff. I need some proof of that. Whereas our ancestors just knew because it just was. There was no need to have an explanation or a word for it. Okay, so some of these words didn't even exist. So, like I said, what you'll find out is there ain't nothing new in the world that our ancestors weren't already doing. And a lot of scientific terms are really ways to try to understand what it is that our ancestors always knew. Okay. So, I also wanted to kind of talk about the importance of the fact that we talk about epigenetics, or you'll hear that, and we talk about generational trauma a lot. But I also want to talk about the fact that there was a lot of amazing ancestral memory and wisdom that we also have inside of our DNA prior to that. So I think it's important to kind of talk about both. You can't talk about one over the other, because when you start to break down the timelines of things and actual histories, true histories of things, there's actually a short period of trauma that we experienced. And prior to that, we were doing some amazing things. But if you're over here in America, you don't hear too much about what it is that our ancestors were doing, previous to the transatlantic slave trade. And a lot of us were already indigenous to this land here for quite some time. And so we don't hear about that history, and that's all by design. And so that's why a lot of what we have to do by accessing our ancestral memory and retracing our ancestry is a reclamation, it's a remembrance. All right. And so we're going to be getting into that a little bit deeper. I don't want to break it all the way down, in the first 10 minutes. Okay. All right. So let's get into the ancestors. Let's just start talking about them for a little bit. Okay. Because our ancestors never left. Okay. In African and Afro Indigenous traditions, our ancestors are not dead, they are transitioned. So a lot of times I don't even say that. When somebody crosses over, somebody passes over, I always say transition. And I've been saying that for some time now. Once I became conscious and aware to these types of subjects, I realized that, for us as souls, we are immortal. For those of us who have a soul, immortality. There's no death. There's only a finality of this existence, but then the soul leaves the body. So the physical body itself, yeah, sure, there's no need for that in the spirit realm, but that soul and that spirit is still, it is still alive. All right. So there is no death. There's no dead. Okay. And in Afro Indigenous traditions and African cultures, they understood this, they know this, they live this, they embody this. They are communicating with their ancestors. Once you start having these contacts with your ancestors and spirit team, they ain't dead. All right. They're just transitioned. And so they're also memory keepers, they're witnesses, they're very much active. Okay. Our ancestors understood that the blood is not biological, but it's spiritual intelligence. All right. And we talked about that in great detail yesterday at the Science versus Spirituality Masterclass, because this is how we start to integrate that spirituality with science. Okay. That so many people want to separate. Okay. Because you need a reason to understand something, and the other person is just say, hey, I know it's just in the blood. I just feel it. I just experience it. Me, I'm the type of person that I need to experience it. Okay. You can't just tell me something. So, and I like that, because for some people, they're more intellectual. So they want to know something. Okay. They may know the hell out of something. They may have read a whole lot of books. But for me, I have to experience it. So I like to know both. I like to know and I like to experience. All right. That way I can see what's resonant with my spirit and my soul. Because some stuff is not meant for me to know, or it doesn't matter. It doesn't help, and it help me to improve or grow on my path. So, me being super intellectual about spiritual concepts is not really important for me. So yeah, and once you start to experience something as well, like nobody's going to tell you because you've experienced it. You don't need nobody else to tell you because you just know. And that to me that's always worked for me. All right. So in African cosmology, the ancestors live through the blood, the bones, the breath, the nervous system, and the dreams. Okay, this is why the elders say that that child's got that grandmother's spirit. You got a spirit like your daddy. Okay, like I said, once again, we are spiritual people. Okay, those of us who are indigenous to the earth and indigenous, Afro-indigenous, we just naturally have this spiritual way about us. Because why? It's in the blood. It's in the blood. It's inside of our DNA. There's ways that we behave and things that we do that are natural to us that may not be native to this lifetime, but it's just like I said, it's coming from other lifetimes. All right. It's coming from our ancestors. All right. So before slavery, our ancestors were doing some amazing things. We talked about that before. They were astronomers, they were herbalists, they were midwives, they were engineers, mathematicians, mystics, healers, timekeepers. They were amazing. Doing some amazing things, not in just one area, not in just Kemet. They were all over the earth doing these things in many different time periods and timelines. Okay, so that's why I said it's very important to understand that with having that kind of magnificent knowledge and wisdom that we were passing around the earth in so many different ways and different time periods, that knowledge doesn't disappear either. I think that's very important to understand that we're not just riddled with trauma and pain and we're just, a bad luck story, but, there's something that happened along the way to cause us to forget our magnificence. And there was a great deal of trouble gone through to make sure that we never remember that. Okay. So that also is something to kind of think, it kind of makes you wonder. And see, I'm the type of person that's like, if you're going to tell me you don't want me to know something, then I got to go figure out what that is. And that's the seeker in me. Okay. So plenty of information out there now that's readily available and accessible to start to tap into certain things that will awaken things inside of your DNA as well. So that knowledge didn't disappear. It just went underground. It just went to sleep. It went dormant. It was buried, but it's still there and it's still alive. So epigenetically speaking, what's encoded wasn't just the trauma, it's also the skill, the adaptability, and the genius. All right. I said genius because I mean it. So when a child is born with, and I think think that's one of the most amazing things to see is children, like small children, because they just come really tapped into spirit, and they just come being these little beings already, exhibiting and behaving their ancestral traits that they remember inside of their DNA. So they come with natural rhythm, deep intuition, emotional sensitivity, leadership, energy, healing hands. That's not random. That's all inheritance. That's all inheritance that they have from within inside of their DNA from their ancestors that they have very close access to. And then, of course, what happens? Well, life, culture, the way that they were raised, things that they see, how they become, it kind of pushes that stuff to the back burner. And next thing you know, it's just kind of laying there dormant, like with most of us. All right. Unless we develop that in the child, and I think we probably have an ability to do that better today than it were, in the past. Because I know for me, I was like having dreams like crazy. I was having telepathic communications with my ancestors. I was a very internal, always receiving messages from the spirit realm, and nobody was paying attention to that in my family. They just thought I was quiet. They was like, "Oh, she's quiet. She likes to keep to herself." They didn't really. There was nobody to develop that, and I don't blame them for that because I recognize that they also too didn't have anybody talking about ancestries in their family. So I was somebody who, like I said, I've always been rooted and connected to my ancestors as a young child. And I really didn't even remember that or understand that until I started to consciously go into my journey into reconnecting with my ancestors and connecting with traditional African spirituality. That's when I realized, oh, it's been them all along, them and my spirit team. Okay. So yeah, so very, very important to understand that for most of us, a lot of that wasn't developed. Not all of us had the privilege and the honor to be like, second, third, fourth, fifth generationally these things passed down to us because a lot of us lost that along the way. A lot of our families lost that along the way. All right. So now I want to go into epigenetics. The body remembers. All right. The epigenetics tell us that the trauma, the stress, the survival, famine, violence, and resilience can alter how genes are expressed, and those expressions can be passed down. Okay, so this doesn't mean that the DNA changes. It means that how the genes express change. Okay, so for Black people, epigenetics explains two truths at once. Okay, why the survival patterns live in the nervous system. All right, and why creativity, adaptability, and intuition are so strong in our people. Okay, so it's like two double-edged swords of the same sword. Okay, so like I said, there's a lot of trauma, survival patterns that is stored inside of us because for the last 400 years our people have been in survival, particularly over here in the Americas and really all over. We know this. We know what colonization and white supremacy has done, but also we also have this immense ability to be creative, adaptable, and intuitive, and strong. Okay, that's who we are innately. That's also in our DNA. And I watch that a lot of times. Anytime I see like an artist or somebody playing an instrument or a sport or whatever it is that I see, to me, everything is better. Like we're so creative, we're so talented, despite it all, despite systems of oppression, and then a lot of times what our ancestors have had to go through, being at the bottom of the totem pole in a lot of situations throughout history, they had this immense ability to be resilient and make a way out of no way. You know what I'm saying? I recently went on a tour in Tampa called the What It Was Walk-In Tour, and I'm actually going to have her as a guest on the podcast. It was an amazing tour, but she was talking about the early beginning of Tampa Black history, and I was just really floored at how much Black history there was in Tampa and how quickly our ancestors elevated shortly after slavery. I mean, how quick they moved from being on rock bottom, nothing, to owning businesses, having schools, having collective economics, having money, having wealth. Like they just really came up so quickly, like in a matter of 10 years. It was really like amazing. And so we have that in our DNA as well, that immense resilience, the immense ability to be creative and adaptable. And a lot of that has to do with not necessarily the survival. The survival kind of pushes you when you're in a situation where you can't go no further. You have no way but up to go. But also the fact that we come from mathematicians, astronomers, herbalists, we come from this amazing background that allows us to pull these resources from our DNA to implement into today's life, so that's the beauty of our ancestors. And whether you're consciously connecting with your ancestors or not, they're still helping you, they're still working with you and assisting you the best they can. Now, if you have some sort of conscious connection with your ancestors, it only gets stronger and better. So if you feel like, oh well, I don't have to reach out to them and contact them if they're already helping me, just think about, if they're helping you right now, how much better it would be if you actually acknowledged them, if you paid some sort of reverence to your ancestors, in some sort of a way, whether it be building an altar or just thanking them, acknowledging them, calling their names, things like that, then you would be able to have a better experience. And I know that for a fact. And anybody else that is working with their ancestors, regularly and passionately, I also know that to be true for them. So if you are somebody that's interested in learning about how you can connect with your ancestors, or how to be able to set up your altar, because I always get people to ask me that, be sure to check out my website. I actually have a book there, how to create and use your ancestral altar. Okay, so it's an ebook available on Amazon, so be sure to check that out. Okay, but yeah, so like I said, we're just we're amazing, and a lot of this has to do with what's stored in our DNA. So for us to be in survival mode, let's go back to that though. They didn't just survive Terra, they adapted brilliantly, all right, to stay alive, to make it so that we could be here today, all right. They learned how to read danger quickly. They learned how to communicate through song and symbol. They hid wisdom in religion, okay. So you had a lot of our traditional African spirituality that was hidden in Catholicism. I actually just recently set up a website. It's a Afro-Indigenous American history site, which was an amazing journey of my own that my ancestors sent me on. But I found out about, I want to say it was Fort Mose in 1738 over here in Florida, that the Spanish abolished slavery like 200 years before the United States did, and well before they actually bought Florida. And they abolished slavery if the people agreed to adopt Catholicism. Well, hell, what you think I would do? That's what I said when I read that. I was like, what you think I'm gonna do? I bet you I'd be a Catholic today. And so what a lot of our ancestors did is they took our traditional African spirituality and hid it inside of the Catholic saints. So it was like, yeah, I'm over here, practicing Catholicism, but really they were still practicing their traditional African spirituality. Brilliant. Okay. So that's what I mean by learning how to be adaptable. Because if somebody was offering me freedom and all I had to do was switch religions, honey, I'd do it in a heartbeat. Back then, okay? But I would still find a way to be devoted to my spiritual practices, all right? So that's what I mean by adapted brilliantly, okay? And then also they preserved medicine in the kitchens, all right? Since they were already dealing and using the herbs, and this is indigenous cultures all around the world, they preserved that medicine in the kitchen, all right? And a lot of the medicines that we have today, one of the number one ingredients in it is going to be some sort of an herb. It's once they put all that other man-made stuff in there that starts giving you those side effects that may include death. Like what the heck, you know? So yeah, and they also protected spirit through ritual, through different practices, so that's where hoodoo comes in. Okay, hoodoo was something that completely evolved into what it is, and that was a mixture and a combination of things taught not only from our African ancestors, but from our Native American indigenous ancestors. And it was also what they adapted towards what they had, the herbs that they had in their different regions, and what was available to them during those times. So hoodoo is a perfect example of protecting spirit through ritual and adapting to the environment. All right. So those survival skills became neurological as well as energetic strengths. All right. So when you sense energy quickly, when you feel something shifts before it happens, when your intuition is sharp, and that's not anxiety, like that's your epigenetic, your neurological system, your network, your cosmic network online tapping into ancestral intelligence. All right. So that basically, if it's anxiety or something, it just hasn't been calibrated. Okay. So you're getting these feelings, something off. All right. And we just and we just know. And it's very interesting that we can come from different families, live in different states, but as Black people and Afro-Indigenous people of the Americas, honey, we have certain behaviors and ways about us that are similar, okay, where we have learned to adapt in our environment over here in America. So a lot of that has to do with the ancestral intelligence that we just haven't learned to recalibrate yet, okay? So a lot of what I talk about here is to get us to start remembering and reclaiming, okay, what was never lost, but restoring our natural order. And we have our ancestors to assist us in doing this, all right? Because we need their help and their guidance along the way to teach us what it is that was never really passed down to us for the past 400 years for most of us, all right? So, translation in ancestral language, the body remembers what the mouth never spoke. Okay. For Black people specifically, enslavement, forced migration, sexual violence, loss of language, loss of land, survival under constant threat. These are experiences that did not disappear when slavery ended. Okay. They became encoded. And then on top of that, as if that portion wasn't bad enough, we still continue to experience stuff like the Jim Crow era and the need for a civil rights movement and a lot of things that are still systemically oppressing up until 2026. All right. So that shit is in our DNA, no matter how old you are, if you're on the planet right now. About the only people who really have an opportunity to get up out of that mess are those who are awakened, conscious, and aware and have activated certain things within inside of themselves. Those who understand who they are and where they came from truly and are connected to their ancestors. And babies, the babies that are just now coming here, wide open, honey. I don't know. I've seen multiple babies that I'm looking at that baby in that baby's eyes and I'm saying that spirit is wide open. I'm like, that spirit came back as the spirit, the soul awakened. Like, so I know that we are moving into different times because these babies look like they are here to change some things. Okay. So I'm really excited for where we are to just even be having this conversation right now with you guys. Like, this was not something that we could do where people would even be receptive to it, not so long ago. All right. So I'm grateful to be able to bring this to you guys because, like I said, it's time. It's time. My ancestors ushering me to do it, and I do what they say. Um, so yeah, those types of experiences did not just disappear because slavery ended. We already know that, and they're encoded in us, and that's why sometimes for some of us, without who have not experienced healing. Anxiety will show up out of nowhere. All right. Hypervigilance feels normal. Like just constantly, being like, got to do something on the lookout. What's going to happen? That feels normal for some people. That survival, that program of survival. Rest actually feels unsafe. And that's how you'll hear people say, oh, I can't just sit there and do a meditation quietly. Why? Because their nervous system is out of whack. And we actually talked about that in another podcast episode. I want to say it was 63. So check that out. I think it was Healing as Ancestral Technology. But yeah, rest feels unsafe to people. Love feels threatening, okay? How many of us have been in a relationship with some emotionally immature men, all right? And the reason why is because they haven't healed that stuff. You're trying to be good to them. You ain't being nothing but good to them. You're being kind, and they see that as a threat, because their emotional self and their nervous system is not healed. Simple as that. You quickly find that out. And then joy feels unfamiliar for some people, because they haven't healed certain things. They're still in the program of survival. They have not recalibrated their DNA and their epigenetics to be able to tap and roll back into what comes before all of that when we experience joy, leadership, happiness, love, family, caring for one another and community, not just our family. So this is not weakness at all. I want to make sure that I say that this is inherited survival, and I feel like awareness is the first place to start with any of this. All right. So if I'm not talking about it, if we're not talking about it, then nothing's happening, But the whole point is to bring some sort of awareness for those who are ready for that level of healing, and then also let them know that there is another way. All right. So I actually have a book also on Amazon called "The 5 Stages of Shadow Work" that talks about the 5 different stages of shadow work, and awareness is the first key. Once you recognize that there's a pattern that you no longer want to continue, you have the ability to be able to change that and shift that, not only in yourself, your life, but the lives that come after you. Okay. And this is how we start to create that generational healing of trauma and start to create a new reality, of happiness, of joy, of love, of care. But, for some of us, for a lot of us, we may be the first ones because the ones that came before us did the best they could to survive, to make sure that we were here. All right. So now I want to talk about how ancestral trauma actually meets daily life. All right. So epigenetics helps explain why you react before you think, why your body tightens around intimacy. The nervous system lives in an on, like you're constantly on. You just can't never relax, you know. And I used to be like that. You know what I'm saying? I used to have all of these patterns. And I talk about my story in the beginning episodes where there was a tremendous amount of healing that I had to do inside of my generation. A lot of trauma that I had gone through and stuff that was also stored in my DNA. So I definitely had a lot of these patterns, okay? And I had to do an immense amount of healing. Now that was my story, but you know, I didn't even understand that a lot of this stuff was inherited until later on, until I started tapping into my ancestry and traditional African spirituality. Because let's face it, we can go to some of these other systems, and I talk about this all the time. Like I started out on the New Age side of things, and I'm grateful for that, you know, because it tapped me into certain things like meditation and yoga and crystals and things that got me to where I needed to be. But the bottom line is, I hit a wall with them, and I got to a certain point where they couldn't help me with my black problems. Okay, like, and it wasn't their fault. It just was is they don't we don't have the same experience, particularly here in America. White people and black people are living two different existences in the same damn country, and we all know that. For those of us that live over here, so that you over here talk about your black problems, child, and the stuff that's just normal for us, you know, having been in survival mode, and they couldn't help me. So I had to be over with. I had to find out about myself first and who I was as a indigenous woman, and then I started to tap into things like melanin and dark matter, and my ancestry and all of that stuff. And that's when I started to learn about, you know, some of the stuff was inherited. Not everything was things that I had done to myself. All right. So my ancestors did not pass down trauma, they passed down adaptation, intelligence, creativity, and spiritual technology. And they also passed down survival. All right. I think that's very important to understand. I don't think anybody intentionally passed down trauma in their lineage, but they did do some things to survive. Let's face it, if you've ever been in a situation where you've had to survive, you do things that you wouldn't normally do. And I think that's what happened. And as a result, some of that adaptation got passed down to us as well. But at the same time, our ancestors, even when they were in survival program, they still had some good things going for them as well that we also have access to and that we can also call upon as well. All right. So they didn't just pass down the adaptation, but intelligence, creativity, and spiritual technology. So you didn't inherit the pain only without inheriting the tools and the gifts. Now, this is where it kind of gets nuanced a little bit. And I think we talked about this a little bit above, like how it's two sides of a double-edged sword. So the nervous system that learned hypervigilance is the same nervous system that's capable of deep perception. You know, we just know. We be tuned in, like we be paying attention, like we be paying attention than some of the other cultures. Put it that way. They don't be paying attention to stuff. We be tapped in, and that's because we have this deep perception that's innately within inside of us in our DNA and as indigenous people. Because why? It goes back to what I said earlier: is we just are naturally spiritually inclined people as indigenous people. Why? Because whether we know it or not, we're still tapping into what's inside of our DNA, and we have access to that on even the most basic level. So, our intuition, just knowing, that is coming from our ancestral memory. The same, and some of our survival patterns or adaptation patterns as well. So, is this the same sensitivity that makes you a healer? Is the same emotional sensitivity that feels overwhelming sometimes? So, you know, sometimes you could be a healer and you just have this sensation to always want to help people, but at the same time, you could also be overbearing and overwhelming and trying to help people that don't want to be helped because you don't recognize that you have that gift of being a healer inside of you. All right. So, it just needs to be recalibrated. It doesn't mean that you need to stop being who you are. It just means that you need to learn how to recalibrate that and be balanced and learn how to serve that gift where it's needed and wanted. So, this work is not to erase what was inherited, it's to separate survival from destiny. And see, that's what we want. Is like I just said earlier, we want to be able to move away from the program of survival and move into our destiny and move into healing. All right. And I always say everything starts with healing. Okay. Everything starts with healing. I don't care what anybody else says, because you're not going to get to point B without A first. And most of us as indigenous people, we have healing to do based on what I just described, based on the entire episode. Okay. Some of us have more than others. Some of us, some of our ancestors may have done some of the work already. Some of us, you the first one. Okay. And for me, that's my story and my family. I'm the first one, and that's okay. I'm okay with that. I signed up for that before I got here. So let's see. Healing is not rejecting your lineage. Healing is updating the software. Okay. So continue to think about this DNA, this blood, this breath, this memory. Now that we know what we know about ancestral spiritual technology and ancestral memory, and think about this as a network that's connected to our ancestors, that's connected to the cosmos, the earth, and all there is. So the real intranet, okay, not the internet that we are experiencing now with the technology that is actually similar to what's already inside of us. Okay, so if you're healing, you're not rejecting your lineage, you're actually updating the software, you're recalibrating the program, you are reactivating codes within inside of your DNA that are the program before systemic oppression, before slavery, before Jim Crow era, back into astronomers and healers and metaphysicians and things like that. All right. So now I'm going to move into what I've already talked about a little bit. You may very well be the one. Okay. And that's okay because your soul most likely signed up for this. Like, ain't nobody taking on to break the generational curses and be the one carrying the torch in their family and having to go through all the pain, persecution, and the things that they have to go through unless their soul signed up for this. Okay. So if it feels like, why the hell me? Because you picked this, because your soul knew, because your ancestors rallied for you to be able to do this because they know that your soul could handle it, and the other people who were not able to, that's okay because they weren't chosen for whatever reason. You chose yourself for this, all right? So here's the part most people don't want to hear. Healing is not just personal, it's intergenerational responsibility. Okay? Somebody got to get us out of this. Who going to get us out of this? Everybody like, I don't want to go through that pain. What if I mess up? All right, so we're gonna send so and so, because they got, they done been around a couple of lifetimes. They more spiritually advanced than we are. We trust them. They're gonna do it. They're gonna make it. And then you know who's gonna help you make it? And this is what helped me throughout my life. My ancestors. My ancestors. Let me tell you something. When there was nobody else, because nobody else knew to be, when I was that little girl that was just quiet, like everybody said, who was having dreams and telepathic communications, and with my spirit team, it was my ancestors. And so my ancestors have been there the whole time along the way. And the more that I grew the relationship with them, the more they were able to represent me in the spirit realm. And of course, it gave me the ability to heal and also strengthen my spiritual gifts as well. So I have their protection. And there's just so much that I get from my connection with my ancestors. But in doing so, they knew that the work that I came here to do was very important. And so they were like, we got you. We got you. So it's intergenerational responsibility. So it's not necessarily just for myself. It's also for my children, my daughters, my grandbaby. It's for any other grandchildren that come after that. It's for the family that has come before. It's for the lineages that's still inside of the spirit realm, okay, that have transitioned and moved on. It's an elevation of the generations. All right. Now, sometimes I want to go ahead and say this too, because there's some people you ain't going to be able to do nothing with that's in your family that come behind because they're set in their ways, they're comfortable where they're at. That's this ain't their assignment, and they cool with it. All right, and some of them may even push you out because you are the one who is breaking generational cycles, and that's okay because you can start to find your tribe and your soul family as well. So just be prepared for that, or maybe some of you are actually going through that now. Just know you're not alone and you're not the only one. All right. So when you regulate your nervous system, you name your emotional truth, you break cycles of self abandonment, you choose safety over chaos and learn how to rest. You're not just healing you, you're interrupting the pattern that's been running for generations. All right. And this is important. Like I said, we're updating that software, that program. And this is why healing can feel lonely. Don't nobody want to get up in that fire with you. Like, people don't get that. People be like, oh my, I'm going to jump out here and do what you do. I'm like, you couldn't even have survived. That's what I think. And I still say that to this day. I'm thinking, man, I can't even believe I'm alive. Like, for real, for real. Like there's been some times that, honey, for me to be here today, my gosh, but I just never gave up, and I also started to see the benefits in my life from the healing work that I was doing too. That was paying off dividends, so I was going to keep doing that as well. But to be on this side today, to be somebody who actually experiences peace, like for real, and it's not just a trending topic for me, and I experience joy, like, just for the hell of it, knowing where I came from, that it's a beautiful feeling. And I just really want to see more of my people experience that, and I'm showing my girls a different way. My daughters are watching an entirely different version of me today, and I think that's beautiful because I'm watching in real time what we talk about by healing intergenerational trauma and being able to now show them a new different type of normal. And some of the things that I do with my family, like my daughters and my grandbaby, the generations before, and my nephews and stuff like that, is different than what I was raised like, So I realized that I'm creating a new normal for our generation, and it's a beautiful thing. It's kind of, sometimes it's a little I won't say uncomfortable, but I'll say it's just new. It's different, and I'll see like sometimes my daughter's watching like, oh, so this what we doing now, and I love that, because it's like, yeah, this is what we doing. No drama necessary. We're just being happy. We're just being comfortable. We're just resting. We ain't loud and all of this extra stuff that's unnecessary. And we learn how to rest. So I love that. So we're interrupting patterns here that's been running for generations, all right? And healing can sometimes feel lonely, but you're stepping out of a familiar frequency. But you're not betraying your ancestors at all. You're absolutely fulfilling them, all right? So, yeah, so you're not just the one that's breaking cycles, you're also the one who reactivates these dormant gifts. And I think that's very important too, because, like I said earlier, everything starts with healing. And once you start to clear certain things and you start to raise your frequency, your vibration, you start to calm that nervous system down where your nervous system feels safe. Then you start to activate these dormant gifts. All right. So now all of a sudden your intuition is like, bing, you know everything. You talking about perception, your dreams are on point. You're starting to know different things that you need to do that's going to assist you on your journey. So now you got your intuition online, you got your ancestors, your spirit team, that you can all hear them very well because your channel and your frequency is clear. So that's very important. So now all of a sudden you got all these gifts popping up and coming online as well because you don't have all this static from trauma and unhealed aspects of yourself in the way. All right. So your ancestors didn't just send you with pain, honey. There is a bright side to this. They sent you with unfinished instructions. All right. So you still going to get access to it. Now, just let me tell you that when you got these unfinished instructions, it's a hell of a lot easier when you actually have a relationship with them. All right. Because then you're going to be able to hear them better instead of trying to, what are you trying to say to me? Like, just freaking out and getting frustrated. And there's many variety of different ways to do this as well. And I'm probably gonna have a class on this coming up soon because my ancestors have me being a little more organized, and I love that. So I'm gonna have like probably the next 6 months of classes available on the website as well. So make sure you're checking that out. But yeah, once you start connected with them, then you'll basically make a space for your ancestral power to come back online. So now your network is becoming active and expanding. That's another thing too. Once you start doing that, you start expanding your ancestors as well. So not just your bloodline ancestors, but higher ascended ancestors you may have never known. All right, that are more ascended that are walking with you, and essentially cosmic lineage for those who have a cosmic lineage. All right. So this is why the healing feels expansive and heavy. And it's because it's some of the biggest shoes you can feel. And people don't want to talk about that. Like everybody wants to talk about the cool stuff. They want to talk about all of the different, Tiamat. They want to talk about, all these different concepts of Kemet and these different deities, but nobody want to talk about healing because everybody knows that healing is not comfortable. All right, healing is done behind closed doors. All right, but the bottom line is some of the most powerful work that you can do and most impactful. All right. Don't sleep on a priestess or a healer just because they calm. Okay. They had to work to get there, they had to survive to get to that place of peace. All right. So they have a sense of inner strength about them that most people would never know because they're no longer bleeding out their trauma. All right. They've healed certain stuff. And so they don't look like what they've been through, most of them. All right. So yeah, you're making space for ancestral power to come back online. So healing feels expansive and heavy, and you're carrying both history and possibility. All right. So you start clearing out the way for stuff, you start creating possibility for things that have never existed yet. How dope is that? All right. So now I'm going to go to the final part of this episode. I think I did pretty good on time, y'all, which is spirituality, science, and remembrance. All right. And like I said, yesterday we had the science versus spirituality masterclass, and it was really nice, y'all. It really was. It was a nice, intimate group. We covered a lot of information, as you can just about imagine, and it was beautiful. That's all I got to say. And so I love talking about this as the final piece because um, this allows us to understand that spirituality and science equals remembrance, and it's all interconnected. All right. Science calls it epigenetics, right? Our ancestors called it inheritance of spirit or ancestral memory. Both agree on this, that experience lives in the body, and this is why healing must be embodied. I think I need to say that again. Healing must be embodied. Okay. So you can kind of tell where a person is in their healing based on the way that they behave, they talk, and they act. Because, like I said, a person who has healed things about themselves, you would never know like some of the stuff that they've been through because you don't just walk around telling everybody your story. And I remember like when I was at of the first part of my healing or a certain part of my healing when I was just telling my story. Okay, I needed everybody to hear because it was just like the first time I was getting it out. And you just telling sometimes people the wrong people. Um, but then I got to a point where it was embodied. It wasn't something that I was talking about anymore. It was just the way that I live. It was the joy that I have. It was the peace I have with inside of myself. It was the boundaries. It was the not needing to be validated by other people. It was the not needing to matter. Now I need you to see that I matter. It was no longer the trying to hustle. That was one that was something that I had to really notice. The top performer, the high performer persona, which is still survival mode. It's a survival program. And that's something my ancestors have been like, rest, okay? Particularly for a lot of us coming out of 2025, that was a major transformation year. I told y'all that at the beginning. And towards the end, it was a huge purging time of year with all the astrological transit moves and things like that. It was a lot of old stuff coming up, right? For a lot of us who've done the shadow work, it was a lot of old rooted issues that were coming up that was like, okay, you need to get through this so that you can ascend to the next phase. And so a lot of that, you know, moved out of the way. And so now here I am in 2026 and I'm like, oh, I got to do this and I need to do this and I got to get this going. And my ancestors are like, have a seat, take a nap, stretch today, eat you something good, go to bed early, and so there, I didn't realize that I also needed to be trained into rest because I still was hanging on to productivity and being a high performer as some sort of achievement or goal. And they're like, that's not necessary. Right now, what's important is conserving your energy so that you're able to make the next moves with power. And I'm like, "Ooh, that's dope." And it really is because what's happening is I'm really honoring my body and my nervous system and where I'm at. So some days I'll be like, "Oh, I got to get this done. I got to hop on the computer. I got to do this. I got to do that." And I am a busy woman, okay? But some stuff can wait. And that's what I'm starting to learn. It's like, okay, I'm changing up my routine. Instead of jumping off my offline from work and then jumping online here to do my other business, I'm going to go ahead and sit down and read a book. And I'm going to eat something. And I'm going to take a nap. And I'm going to stretch. And I'm going to massage my feet. And I'm going to take a bath. Um, those are the things I'm doing. And then I go to bed early. And then next thing you know, I wake up and I have so much more clarity. I have much more immense insight. I've had dreams and downloads, and now I know how to move more powerfully in whatever direction I was trying to go in. So, these are just very important aspects of understanding that healing has to be embodied. And then when we're tapped into our spirit, our intuition, and our ancestors, we just kind of know the things that we need. All right. So healing is embodied, and talk therapy alone is not enough. And I'm not against talk therapy because I feel like some people have some things they need to talk through with a therapist. By all means, do that. I'm not here to talk down about therapy, but I do believe, based on my experience, I need it more. to go deeper into, because once again, it's that same scenario where I'm going to hit a wall, because let's face it, therapy is typically not spiritual. Okay, it's therapy. And unless you have the right therapist, they still may not be able to guide you. My therapist is my ancestors. My ancestors was my therapist for a long time, okay? And why spiritual bypassing also doesn't work. So thinking that, oh, I can read about it, I can learn about it, I can watch a video, and I'm not going to do anything. All right, that's not going to do nothing. The trauma ain't going nowhere. It's going to come up in other different ways. And particularly where we are now, age of Aquarius, and we're moving into ascension, not everybody, because you still got to do that shadow work in order to do it. This stuff is just going to keep repeating, and it's going to come faster and faster, and you will not be able to bypass it, okay? Or you're just going to be in pain until you finally say, this shit is not working. I need to heal something. Okay. So spiritual bypassing never works, and the body must be included. Okay. Healing happens when the nervous system feels safe, the story is told, the body releases, and the spirit is honored. And I love how it says the story is told. Okay. You ain't got to run around telling nobody the damn story no more, because it's a part of a past timeline. It's something that happened, and chances are by the time you get to the point where you're done telling the story, you've integrated it now, which is the fifth stage of the shadow work that I talk about in my book. Okay. So you've integrated it now. You've gone through the awareness phase. You've gone through whatever process you need to go through. You've made peace with it. Now you've integrated it as this was a part of my story, but this is not who I am. You know what I'm saying? So the story is already told. You ain't got to keep telling that. The body releases and the spirit is honored. So science says epigenetics. Our ancestors say spirit memory. But the bottom line is that our body stores maps. It stores maps for healing, for leadership, for community, for survival and transcendence. And this is why healing must be embodied. Again, why movement, breath, ritual, and rest matter. Absolutely. So, your intuition, like I said, is going to strengthen when the nervous system softens. We talked about that in another episode and just previously in this one. All right. I think it's also very important to understand, too, if you're listening to this episode and you think, well, damn, how am I going to get there? I got so much work to do. Just understand that you're not broken, okay? And you're carrying history. And the fact that you even have that awareness about yourself to say that, man, there's work that needs to be done, that is a huge step that some people never make it to. So, honor where you're at in the process. It's definitely not a race, it's a marathon, it's a journey. It definitely is a journey. Some days are going to be better than others. You're going to be on and off. But one thing I can say from personal experience is that it is worth it, because who I am today compared to who I was when I first started all of this is totally different. And I carried a lot of pain for a long time that I didn't have any other way to process out. And so that's a lot of times why I do what I do, because I realize not everybody has access to therapy. Not everybody has a family that's on this healing journey. Okay. And so I offer these, tips and tools and ways to be able to start to tap into ways that you can actually heal and become empowered on top of that, to tap into your spiritual gifts and powerful gifts that we all have, right? Accessing your ancestors, because they're just going to help you. They're just going to make it easier for you, okay? They're going to guide you. They're going to help to protect you from stuff. And like I always say, my ancestors be protecting me from me more than anybody, okay? And then you start to also learn different tools and rituals and practices, how to practice spiritual hygiene, so how to protect your energy, how to stay away from people, how to set boundaries. And of course, you start to connect with some like minded people along the way too. So you have other people to talk to. Because, like I said, you start learning stuff and healing stuff, it gets a little lonely out there. You ain't got nobody to talk to. But, you'll start to, the universe will know that you're doing certain things, and the divine will start connecting you towards people who are in alignment with the new version of you. All right. So let me say this very, very clearly, because you are not broken. You're not defective. You're not too much. You're just carrying unresolved memory, and that needs to be recalibrated. And the fact that you're aware of this means you're chosen to transmute it. All right. So that's not a burden, it's an initiation, because you're coded. You need to understand that. And I talk about activating your divine feminine codes all the time. This is what I'm talking about. All right. I'm talking about you're coded with memory, power, adaptability, creativity, and spiritual intelligence. All right. Some of that coding needs healing, some of it needs permission to rise, And this work is learning the difference. All right. So some of this stuff is being remembered, some of this stuff is being reclaimed and reactivated. Some stuff you'll activate and you'll be like, oh, yeah, like I know this. And that's what we're trying to do is we're trying to activate those parts of ourselves that exist within inside of us before a pattern of survival. All right. So hopefully you guys got something out of this podcast episode, because I think this was a powerful episode. And if you think so too, please leave a comment down in the comment section. I love y'all's comments because some of them are really deep. And definitely, if you want to go deeper and dive into deeper to some of these topics, be sure to check out my website below, holisticandspiritualaf.com, for any classes, any books, consultations. I'm also going to be adding some healing sessions on there as well, because I am an energy healing and healer as well, and I've been practicing that for quite some time. Actually, I'm gonna stop putting dates on stuff because y'all gonna figure out how old I am. And yeah, so with that being said, y'all, that is it. Until the next episode. Peace.